My wife and I moved here to Utah, 99, so what's that, 15 years ago.
Yes.
And one of the things I like about Utah in particular, and Park City specifically, is that you can be at a coffee shop and the 5 guys in line in front of you can outski you, outclimb you, outride you. You know, it keeps you honest. You know, so fittest CEO is a nice thing. I went to that competition last year in 2013, and I came in second, thinking in the last run that I had accumulated enough points to win, and I didn't. And right at the very end, I realized that I had come in second. So this year, I went back and luckily came one place better. And the guy who came second was third the year before, and I beat him by over 3 days of events, 45 seconds of accumulated time. So it was really, really tight. And I'm dreading what my workouts are going to have to look like in 2015 to go back and try to repeat, because I know he's going to find that 45 seconds. So tonight I want to talk to you about, is there a clicker up here for me, or do I just ask you to go?
You know what, we'll get it for you.
Okay, that'd be great. If you can just click to the next one while I start. Karen already mentioned a little bit about what I'm going to talk about. A lot of the work that I do and have done over my whole career is all around this idea of balance, maintaining our balance. That doesn't sound like a very exciting career, right? Studying balance. But what it's about, when I talk about balance, what I'm really referring to, and I'll show you some slides to this effect in a little bit, is biochemical balance. How can we keep our enzymes and our neurotransmitters and our hormones and all that kind of stuff in balance? Because when it goes out of balance, bad stuff happens. When it goes out of balance, that's when we feel tired. That's when we feel depressed. That's when our performance goes down. That's when our mental focus goes. That's when we don't perform as well as we want to perform. So it's all about coming back into balance and maintaining balance in the face of this world that is unbalancing us.
Way up. All the way up.
That'll unbalance you, that kind of noise. So you know, the world around us is trying to put us out of balance, and we can get out of balance and not feel great, but getting back into balance is a lot easier than I think a lot of people think. I was talking to a journalist the other day about this concept of going out of balance, and it's one of the things that strikes me is that so many people that I've worked with or interacted with over the years just think, well, you know, I'm tired because I'm getting old, and that's normal. Or I'm tired or depressed or just not feeling great or feel old or feel sore or feel stiff or whatever the sort of fill in the blank is or why they don't feel their best. They think it's a normal situation because they don't get enough sleep, or that, you know, their job is stressful, or they sit in too much traffic, or they can't eat right because they don't have enough time, and all that kind of stuff. And that to me is a dangerous thought, that people think that that's a normal situation. It shouldn't be normal at all. Our normal situation should be we should pop out of bed. We should be energetic all day. We should be in a good mood. We should have great mental focus. We should be creative. But then at the end of the day, we should feel nice and relaxed, and we should fall asleep like that. Unfortunately, where most people are when they're out of balance in these ways that I'll describe tonight, they drag themselves through the day. They don't feel energetic. They feel that they have brain fog. They drag themselves through thinking, when I get to bed, I'm just going to drop right in and sleep like the dead. And you don't. Your mind starts going, and you're too restless to fall asleep. You've got to get a restful night's sleep. And then that cycle repeats itself, even worse the next day. It's a very, very vicious cycle in some important ways. And so that is kind of the normal situation these days. And a lot of people, I think, will go, well, that's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way other people are, and that must be the way I'm supposed to be. But if we look at a normal human circadian rhythm that's in balance, you should be energetic in the day and relaxed at night. You should be creative in the day and relaxed at night. It should all sort of click together like that. And it's neat, the kind of work that I do. It's cool from a scientific perspective. I'll share some data with you. But it's also cool on a personal level. When you see somebody go from a state of imbalance, and we have actual scientific words to describe that state of imbalance, and you put them back into a state of balance, it's very much life-changing for them. They'll say things like, everything's just clicking right now. Or if they're trying to lose weight, they don't have to try to lose weight. It just sort of happens because their body is metabolically balanced. So a lot of really cool things happen on a personal level that sort of supersede some of the scientific pieces that I'm going to talk about tonight. So think about that idea of what is causing us imbalance in our lives. And you look at a list like this, and you ask yourself, emotional stress, physical stress, environmental stress, non-optimal diet. That's a lot of stuff. These are things that are all around us that we can't escape. And so I'm a nutritionist and a physiologist. I want people to eat 5 to 10 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. I want people to get 8 or 8.5 hours of sleep every night. I want people to be physically active on more days of the week than not. I want you to do all those sorts of things. And I'm not the first person who's said that kind of stuff to you, right? But I'm also very much an advocate of dietary supplements to fill that gap when we can't do all of the kinds of things that you've heard of before, to beat back these sources of stressors. If you look at that list, what do you think is the most prevalent one up there? Anyone care to guess? The one that affects the most people, the most hours of the day. Stress and emotional. Yeah, emotional stress in particular. Any of those in specifically? Traffic. You can set traffic on the way here. Is that what this is? Bills. This one, financial stress, is the number one. If you look at the studies, financial stress is the one that's there for most people most of the time. And one of the reasons for that is that financial stress is one of these kinds of things that's always in the back of your mind. It's always there. When you wake up in the morning, you're thinking about your job and making a paycheck. When you go to bed at night, you're thinking about, the mortgage that you have to pay at the end of the month. It's always there. And that kind of low-grade chronic stress is very insidious. It changes our hormone balance. That still within normal levels, but a little bit higher than would be optimal, eats away at the body in some important ways that I'll talk about. So when you look at somebody like that who's under these kinds of stressors, and you look at them biochemically, they look exactly the same no matter what kind of stress they're under. So I've got these examples. I can look at an overtrained athlete, somebody who's dieting to lose weight, restricting their calories, somebody who's a short sleeper, and I'll explain that in a second, or somebody who's just normally stressed out by the modern world. A short sleeper is somebody who gets about 6 hours of sleep if we assume that the average that we need is about 8 hours. Right? So that doesn't sound like a big difference. How many people would be in that boat by a show of hands? Closer to 6 hours on average than 8. That's maybe 50% of the hands went up. That's actually pretty good. Usually 70, 75, 80% of the hands will go up because not a lot of people get the right amount of sleep. But that short sleeper, that person with 6 hours versus 8 hours, will have 50% overexposure to cortisol, a primary stress hormone. And I'll talk about cortisol in a little bit. If your cortisol is high, you can actually follow these short sleepers over time. That person who gets 6, because of their higher cortisol, that cortisol is going to interfere with their blood sugar control. Their blood sugar is going to fluctuate more often than it should. They're going to have changes in their appetite. They're going to crave carbohydrates, and specifically they'll crave sweets. And that's a biochemical signal that you have to listen to. You can't just say to yourself, I'm going to be strong, right? Because you can be strong for a couple hours, and you'll eventually give in to that, and you'll eat something, and it's typically some sort of junk food. That junk food, because of the cortisol signal, is more likely to be stored around your belly fat region. Because of the belly fat storage and because of the interference with blood sugar control, these people are actually pre-diabetic just because they miss 2 hours of sleep. Right? That is the kind of work that I do. How does that lifestyle change, or that lifestyle situation, how does that transmitted biochemically in the body to have some sort of a physiological or psychological outcome? And I'm going to try to weave that theme through the rest of the talk. So these people have the same biochemical disruptions: cortisol, blood sugars, free radical load, inflammatory cytokines, things like that. So if I looked at them biochemically, if I looked at their just their tracing of their numbers, I wouldn't know, is this stressed person an overtrained athlete, or are they a short sleeper, for example. They have the same psychological outcomes. So those same people are experiencing the same levels of higher fatigues than normal, higher levels of confusion, which is like brain fog, lack of ability to focus, lower levels of vigor or higher levels of burnout, higher levels of depression indexes that we can measure. So it's one thing that my research, I think, has been pretty successful in showing over the last 10 years or so, is that link between biochemistry and psychology. So I say to audiences all the time, biochemistry drives behavior. The reason we feel a particular way, happy or sad, energetic or fatigued, mentally focused or confused brain fog is because of some aspect of biochemistry. We can point to, oh, it's cortisol, oh, it's blood sugar, oh, it's cytokines, oh, it's whatever. There's things that we can point to. And the reason why I think that's important is because it makes it objective. It makes it so we can study it in a robust way. But for that person that's experiencing it, it also makes it a little more real, right? So you can point to something in your body and say, aha, there's a reason that I'm tired. And that makes it more, what's the word that I'm looking for? Concrete to them. They feel like doing something about it because they know that there's something there that they can change. They can lower their cortisol. They can lower their free radical load. They can increase their antioxidants. They can lower their inflammation. Whatever the case may be, once you can sort of drill it down to that, you can say, okay, here's how we fix that. Here's how we solve that problem. And that's a little bit about what I'll talk about as we go through here. So they all have the same benefits once we restore that biochemical balance. And so if we accept this, that this is the kind of world that we live in, right? That sometimes this is going to be your dinner. A bowl of French fries and a Coke, or a Diet Coke, equally bad in different ways. Or this is the air that we breathe, right? We're in Park City, so you guys have pristine, beautiful air. I just drove up from the valley, and it's already getting smudgy and yucky down there. All of these sources of stress, right? Like I said before, I want you to eat those 5 to 10 servings of fruits and vegetables. I want you to do all those things that you know you're supposed to do, but we can't always. And even if we do that, we can't do it on a regular basis. And even if we do it on a regular basis, there's still places that we can fix and we can tweak and we can manipulate. So how do we do that? Where do we look for ideas, right? Where I look for my ideas when we do product development, when we do research projects, is I look to traditional medical systems, because whether you look at ancient Greek medicine, this is a sort of an Icarus image. If you look at traditional Chinese medicine, if you look at traditional Indian medicine or Ayurveda, those systems of medicine are all about balance. You know, they didn't have the technology 3,000 years ago in TCM to be able to say, well, cortisol and circadian rhythm and inflammatory indexes, right? They didn't have that kind of stuff, right? What if you were out of balance 3,000 years ago and the TCM version of shaman came to you? What do you think their diagnosis would be? Any idea? Anybody know TCM at all? Yeah, yin deficiency, right? You might be yin deficient. You might have a stagnation of your chi. There are ways that they would describe it. Chi is this kind of the life force in the body. So there are ways that they could realize that you're out of balance in some way. Use natural means. Use fruits and vegetables and herbs and roots and extracts and things like that to bring you back into balance. And restore your yin-yang balance. Align your chakras. Restore your chi, all that kind of stuff. When I first started getting into this area of research, trying to apply Western techniques to study Eastern medicines, Eastern herbals, trying to figure out the lingo was the hardest thing, because I'd go to my TCM colleagues and I would say, well, what did you guys use for treating stress 3,000 years ago? And they'd go, we didn't have that. We didn't have something called stress. Oh, what did you use for overtraining? What did you use for burnout? What did you use for whatever the thing that I would call it would be? And after a lot of back and forth, we realized, oh, what you're talking about is a deficiency of the chi, that kind of stuff. Once you learn the linkages, it all sort of makes sense. And I'll go back to my TCM colleagues and I'll say, well, look, we just collected this data and, we give this herbal blend and cortisols go down 15%, or something like T-bars, cellular stress goes down 40%, and we're using these herbs, and they look at me and they'll go, well, duh, of course it works. We wouldn't be using it for 3,000 years if it didn't work, right? I mean, that system was, back in the day, it literally was a system of trial and error, where if it didn't work, it went in the junk heap, and the ones that worked were the ones that stood the test of time, and those are the ones we have available to us now. So if you look across all of those ancient cultures, and even across modern cultures in sort of different niches, everybody has a word for what we're doing. I call it vigor. Some people would just call it energy, but I call it vigor. So in psychology research, I'll show you the definition of it in a little bit, but vigor is one way of measuring how people are feeling, a very reproducible, objective way that we can get into the psychology of what that person is experiencing. The opposite of vigor, anyone know what the opposite of vigor is? From psychology or insight? It's caused by stress, begins with a B. Depression is a piece of it. Burnout. Yeah, burnout. Now that's something probably everybody in the room has heard of before. That's a word that is part of our normal sort of public vocabulary. Nobody says vigor, right? It sounds kind of old-fashioned, vim and vigor kind of thing. But it's a defined term in psychology research. Same thing with burnout. Vigor and burnout are the opposite things. But you can look at some of these other things. Focus, swing, this is a terminology from rowing. Prana, this is the same concept of chi. Chi is from traditional Chinese medicine. Prana from Ayurveda. Some people would just say they're in the zone when they're feeling this way. Motivation, et cetera, et cetera. So lots of ways to describe this, but it's kind of a universal feeling that when it's gone, you know it's gone, and when it comes back, it literally, like I said before, is kind of life-changing. So here's the definition of vigor. Three-tiered mood state characterized by physical energy, mental acuity, and emotional well-being. We measure depression separately. We measure confusion and mental focus separately. We measure fatigue separately. This is more of a, sort of a holistic way of measuring how somebody is feeling and functioning. So for the athletes in the room, there are studies that show that you can measure vigor in athletes, and if your vigor is low, you might as well not even compete that weekend. You might as well not even go to the starting line because your performance will be poor. It doesn't necessarily follow that if your vigor is high, you're going to win the gold medal, right? Because there's lots of things that go into athletic performance. But if your vigor is low, you're not going to perform well no matter what, no matter how the day goes. There's data that shows that sort of a thing. And that, I think, kind of captures the idea of vigor being this kind of a performance measurement, right? It's not just psychology. It's not just how we're feeling. It really is something that expresses itself in so many ways. Here are some of the things that go into a study of vigor. So this is a word cloud from one of my books. My 16-year-old daughter is extremely impressed that her dad knows how to make a word cloud in the first place on the internet. But this shows the predominance of the word in the book. So, you know, with the study of vigor, you're looking at cortisol, primary stress hormone, certainly stress, certainly biochemistry, but then some of these other things, fatigue, balance, supplements, glucose, oxidation, energy, antioxidants, all of this goes back to that idea of maintaining biochemical balance for that biochemistry to drive your behavior. So I ask people this question a lot. What does energy mean to you? Because when we do a study of vigor, nobody wants to say vigor, right? They will say energy, right? When you drill down below someone's perception of fatigue, so if your vigor is low, you're going to be tired. If your depression is high, you're going to be tired. If you have a high index of confusion, brain fog, you're going to be tired. And that, to me, was a revelation that a lot of people didn't necessarily have fatigue, so to speak. Their fatigue indexes were good, but their depression levels were high, and yet they were still saying to us, I'm tired. So that sort of statement of, I'm tired, I'm fatigued, I have a lack of energy, can come from a lot of places. It can really be your body is sensing depression, but you're not going to say depression, so you say you're tired. You might have brain fog. You're not going to say I'm confused, you say you're tired. You might have burnout, and you're not going to say burnout, you're going to say you're tired. So that energy fatigue sort of language is something that we use a lot. And I think that's one of the reasons that the energy drink category, Red Bulls and Monsters and Rockstars and that style beverage, I think that's one of the reasons it's such a big category. Depending on what statistics you look at, 4 billion, 6 billion, 20 billion by 2020. Lots of people don't have a lot of energy, and lots of people are looking for a trigger, or something to trigger their energy levels. But the problem with that approach is that if that caffeine sugar concoction is your solution, so to speak, it's not going to be addressing your issue if it's depression. It's not going to be addressing your issue if it's brain fog. It's not going to be addressing your issue if it's stress. So that's where I think the disconnect comes. So when we try to modulate vigor in people, and we look at different ways of restoring balance in their body, we'll usually do it over the course of an 8-week program or a 12-week program, where we also do dietary interventions. We also do sleep hygiene, where we teach people how to sleep and what to do before they go to bed and things like that. So we do a lot of things besides just the herbs that we're looking at. But we had a class. This was a class that I taught down in Draper, where I live, where a woman got up and has anyone ever heard my vacuum cleaner story? Okay, so she got up in a group of 50 or 60 people that we were collecting data on, and it was maybe week 3, maybe week 6, I don't remember exactly, but people were sharing how they were feeling at whatever this time point was. And one guy got up and said, yeah, my energy is back, I feel really good. Someone else got up and said, my mental focus is really there, I feel like a cloud has been lifted. Somebody else got up and said their stress was low, etc. And she got up and she went, yeah, more energy, yeah, mental clarity, yeah, stress, yeah, my mood, all those things, but none of that truly captured it for her. And she wasn't going to say vigor, because that's not a vocabulary word, like I said before, and it was a study about vigor. And she goes, I just know she kind of gave up. She didn't have the word for it, so she was done. And she just went, I just know I'm getting a lot more vacuuming done. And everyone laughed, and she kind of sunk into her seat and shrunk down and tried to disappear. And I really singled her out, and I said, that right there is it. Because she had something going on in her body that she didn't have before that motivated her to get up and do something, right? So, vacuuming, awesome, right? If that's what she wants to do, more power to her. But I think that a lot of people would exercise more if their vigor were higher. They would eat better if their vigor were higher. They'd be more motivated to do a lot of things that they sort of have on their bucket list, but they don't because they don't have enough energy. And the reason for that is because their body's out of balance in a certain way. When we study it, we study lots of different switches, so to speak, biochemically. These are the big 4. There are other ones, but these are the ones that I'm going to mention mostly in the next half hour or so that I'll be up here. It's different aspects of biochemistry, but I put them in the same bubble sometimes because they're very often chicken and egg scenario. When you study oxidation, you almost always have inflammation around, and vice versa, and you don't always know which one came first. But solving one often helps solve the other one. Allostatin, which is cortisol testosterone balance, glycation, which is glucose balance. So modulating any of these improves vigor, any of them separately. But when you modulate them all simultaneously, you can get a very, very dramatic effect, very quick effect in people. And we discovered this. I've been doing this for about 12 years, and our very first studies were to manipulate this one, glucose, within the context of could we help people feel better and have better appetite and therefore help them lose weight more efficiently, right? Help them be more compliant on the regimen that we wanted to. So we were able to give them herbal blends to help control glucose. We got very good glucose control going through the program. A few people just went blam, out of glucose control, out of glucose balance. Their glucoses were all over the place, sometimes high, sometimes low, sometimes high, sometimes low. They were just fluctuating like crazy. And our initial thought was, well, obviously these people are off the diets, right? They've gone to the Dunkin' Donuts or the Krispy Kreme or something. They're not doing what we've prescribed to them. And when we pulled them aside and found out what was going on, it wasn't that at all. It was that they had either had some sort of a family issue, so they had a lot of psychological stress, or they had a sleep issue. They had a sleep deprivation kind of a problem. And when we realized that, a light bulb went off, and we went, aha, this one, cortisol, was interfering with the glucose control. And that's something very, very well known in biochemistry. And so we expanded our programs to start controlling cortisol levels. At the same time, we controlled glucose. And then what happened? We went through that for a while. We found a subset of people that started going out of balance. And what we found was inflammation was the problem for those people. Inflammation was causing problems here, causing problems there. A couple studies later, we found that we could go even further up the biochemical cascade to oxidation. So right now, that's about as high up as we can go. As high up as we know how to go anyway at this point. This is kind of the oxidation, the balance between free radicals or oxidants and antioxidants. That balance is about as high up the biochemical cascade as we can go. It's, in a lot of ways, I describe it as the first domino in the chain of events biochemically. So think of it this way. Let's say you control your blood sugar to help you with your appetite, help you with your fat burning, help you to lose weight. Great thing to do. But if you haven't fixed this, Anytime you're under stress, it's going to interfere with what you're doing. If you haven't fixed inflammation, it's going to interfere. If you haven't fixed the oxidation piece, it's going to interfere. So where I stand now, oxidation is the first one to control, the first one to rebalance, first one to reset, because that's the one that cascades down and messes up all the other ones, okay? So when we look at antioxidants, this is an area that kind of spawned the idea of the book that you saw in Karen's introduction, this idea of deadly antioxidants. And this, on the radio interview this morning, this was one of the questions that Lynn asked me. She said, deadly antioxidants, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. These are things, these antioxidants that are supposed to be protecting us, that are supposed to be, we're taking these to get a healthful effect. You know, how in the world can they be deadly? And the reason for that, which I'll get into in a little more detail, is that we've gone overboard, right? Antioxidants are about balance in and of themselves. You can have too little, and that's a bad thing. You can have the right amount. It's sort of a Goldilocks story, right? Too little is bad. Just right is good. Too much is bad. It's the porridge was too cold or too hot. And you want it just right. The secret here, these two products, Protandim and TrueScience, take a different approach on antioxidant metabolism. So if we look at antioxidant metabolism here, free radical and oxidative stress affects every single tissue in the body, affects every single cell in the body. And the idea of taking antioxidants, the sort of standard therapy, vitamin E, vitamin C, beta-carotene, selenium, multivitamins, that kind of stuff, that is eroding away. We're learning things about that approach that are getting most of us as scientists to go, uh-oh, we got it wrong. Right, and I'll explain how wrong in just a little bit. But the future of where this is going is trying to get each of these tissues to make its own protective antioxidants. That's something that a lot of people don't understand, is that every single cell in the body has the ability to make its own antioxidants and maintain its own balance right down at the cellular level. So I'll get into that as I go through. This is what that looks like. This is the body's internal system of protective antioxidants. I'll leave it up there for a minute for you if you want to copy it down. I put it up there to impress upon everyone that it's fairly complicated, but it's a very coordinated system. So different kinds of oxidants or different kinds of free radicals in the atmosphere, or they get produced by our normal metabolism. Things like superoxide, probably the most potent or the most damaging of all the free radicals, hydrogen peroxide. These are counteracted or quenched by very specific antioxidants. So this one, superoxide dismutase, probably the most potent of all the antioxidants that your body makes, will fight against this superoxide, converting it into a much less damaging, but still damaging. This is very damaging. This is somewhat damaging. A different free radical called hydrogen peroxide, which is then counteracted by another enzyme we produce called catalase. And catalase converts hydrogen peroxide into two very lovely compounds, water and oxygen, that our bodies do well with. So you can see superoxide dismutase, catalase, glutathione peroxidase. These are enzymes that can protect us from all of that damaging effect around us, from that air pollution, from the ultraviolet radiation of sunlight, from a wide range of other sort of toxins, xenobiotics, that can damage the cell in different ways. So this is built into every cell. If we could just harness that, it would take away our need to kind of supplement to be better than this. Why be better than this? This has been developed over millions and millions of years of evolution in the cell to allow us to live where we live. Right? Think about the world you live in right now. The world, the Earth, is an oxygen-rich environment. If we didn't have this built in, we wouldn't be here having this discussion right now. Our cells would be so damaged at the cell membrane, at the DNA, at the mitochondria, that they would get damaged, they would become dysfunctional, we wouldn't survive on a cellular level. Right? So this is very, very, very important stuff. But most people don't even know that this exists. Back in March, I did a 20-city national radio tour where we talked to radio stations all around the country to the health shows. Not a single one of those health journalists had ever heard of this concept that our bodies can make their own antioxidants. So, I'm very fond of saying, besides biochemistry drives behavior, I'm very fond of saying, don't take antioxidants, make antioxidants, because this is what we can do. The reason something like broccoli is good for us, or one of the very important reasons, is that it can activate this process, right? Broccoli in and of itself isn't a very good antioxidant, but it can turn on this pathway. Onions can turn on this pathway. Brussels sprouts can turn on this pathway. Red wine, flavonoids in dark chocolate. A lot of the foods that we know to be healthy are healthy because of their ability to activate this pathway. So eat all those foods. And there's a huge scientific literature that shows that if we activate that pathway and turn on our body's ability to make those protective enzymes, we do better. Right? And so this is just a gamish of some of the articles that have been published showing if you activate that pathway, your heart does better, your blood vessels do better, your brain does better, your lungs do better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it does really seem to work in every single tissue that's been looked at so far. And that's a pretty good thing. These, by the way, are all specific studies that have been done on the Protandim formula, which is a blend of those 5 ingredients. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But people aren't doing that. Remember I said that none of those 20 health journalists had ever heard of this. And in the public at large, virtually nobody has heard of this story, that you can protect yourself by consuming the right sorts of nutrients. This is what people are doing. They're taking vitamin E, taking high doses of C, taking high doses of beta-carotene and selenium and multivitamins, as I mentioned before. And about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, studies started coming out, big studies, conducted over long periods of time and published in very esteemed medical journals showing things like vitamin E and an increased risk of prostate cancer, beta-carotene and an increased risk of lung cancer, different antioxidant like multivitamin kinds of supplements, and increased risk of skin cancer. And when the first one started coming out, most of us in nutrition kind of went, no, that can't be right. These are good for us, and it was the time of 10 or 12 years ago of, more is probably better, right? If a little bit of E is good, then why don't you supplement with 1,000% of the daily value, and that's going to really protect your heart. Not so much, right? And what we're seeing now is clearly from these studies, when I showed this slide at an anti-aging conference next week in Las Vegas, everybody in the audience is going to know these data, and they're going to go, well, yeah, we've known this for 10 years, right? Why are you showing this data? This story that we've known about for 10 years hasn't flipped over or tipped over into the public domain, right? The average person doesn't know this stuff yet. But when they do find out about this, when they hear about it on Dr. Oz, when they read about it in the Solid Tribune, right? When this story becomes mainstream news, I think people are going to go, I better not do that anymore. I better stop doing this, because not only is it not protecting me, it's causing problems. This one in particular, looking at dietary supplements, antioxidant supplements in particular, and higher mortality rates. You guys know what mortality is, right? That's dying sooner than you ought to. That's a difficult side effect to come back from, right? I mean, these aren't just like, for a little while, the idea, when these papers first started coming out, a lot of people would say, well, they're probably not going to hurt you, but they might not help you, so it's okay. Now we have the data that shows that they are hurting you if you're taking them the wrong way. There's also data for the athletes in the room showing that if you over-supplement with antioxidants to protect yourself, right? When you exercise, when we go out for a run, our oxidative load is about 30 times what it is at rest, right? So you're creating a lot more oxidative stress. You're causing a lot more damage in your lungs, in your muscles, in your blood vessels, in all of those places that are transporting oxygen through your body and during the metabolism, mitochondria, and et cetera. So it would be logical for you to say, I need more vitamin E, I need more vitamin C, I need more quercetin, I need more resveratrol, I need more. And what we're finding is that not so much this damaging your body, killing you, causing disease in athletes, but stopping the adaptation phase. So you're not getting stronger, you're not getting faster, you're not getting bigger, whatever your outcome of exercise, that training adaptation isn't happening because somehow those high doses of antioxidants are counteracting that effect. We know that turning on your body's own antioxidants don't have that effect, don't have that detriment to your training adaptation. So how do we do that? The way we do that is to look back to ancient medicine, look back to TCM and Ayurveda, and look at things like this. Look at things like Bacopa, Silymarin, which is from milk thistle, Withafrin, which is from ashwagandha, EGCG from green tea, curcumin from turmeric. The reason I have these 5 up here is because these are the 5 herbal extracts. They're not 5 pure compounds like that, but pure, concentrated herbal extracts in Protandim. These are the 5 that we have there, and the 5 are exciting because they truly synergize. Synergy is a term that I don't use cavalierly. It's a term that's kind of thrown around the industry. People will think, well, here's product A and product B, and you put them together and you get a synergistic benefit. You have no idea if you get a synergistic benefit. They might cancel each other out, so you get no benefit whatsoever. To show true synergy, you have to study the effect of this one, and the effect of this one, and the effect of this one, etc., and then the effect of the combination, and show, is it truly synergistic, or is it just additive, or is it canceling out, or what is exactly happening? These 5. Well, let me ask you this question first. Each one of these on their own can activate that system of protective enzymes in the body, can turn that process on, basically. Do you think if somebody who is not taking any of these at all, how many people in here know the LifeVantage product, Protandim? Right? And a big part of the story is the synergistic blend, right? One thing that really drives me crazy is when someone picks up the bottle and they go, turmeric, green tea, yeah, got it. I'll get those down at the Whole Foods, right? What if they did that? What if they went down to the Whole Foods or wherever and got green tea, turmeric, and milk thistle and just took them themselves? Do you think they'd get a benefit?
Sure.
So I heard no, yes, maybe, some. Yeah, they'd get a benefit. If they're doing nothing now and they started taking turmeric tomorrow, they're going to get a benefit. They're going to get some activation of that system. That's great. They're going to get better than they were before. What if they added green tea to it? Yeah, they'll get some benefit. They'll probably get double the benefit they were getting with just turmeric. And then if they added milk thistle, they get, now they're at 3 times. They add another one at 4 times. But that's an additive benefit. What we get in Protandim is somewhere around, depending on the bioassay you look at, 11, 13, 15, 18, depending on the assay you look at, depending on the antioxidant that you're looking at, the production of. That's a true synergy, that you're getting that sort of effect. So we have data that shows this is what we get with curcumin, the specific one we have in our product. Here's what we get with the green tea extract, the specific one we have in our product, and then we're able to show a very strong, very dramatic synergy that's orders of magnitude higher than what you get with them separately. So that's a pretty good place to be, and that's what the subject of all our patents are. That's what the invention is. That you shouldn't get that synergy. That synergy is unexpected, is novel. That's what the invention is. That we're able to activate the body's protective shield, so to speak, at a much higher level than you would expect based on the individual ingredients. So where does this put us from a protect the body standpoint? Let me explain to you how this is working before I get into some of the data. This is a cell, right? This is how Protandim or any of these NRF2 activators have their effect. They turn on the production of these stress-related enzymes, these protective antioxidant enzymes, and not just antioxidant enzymes. What Protandim is activating is a shielding effect and a cleanup effect through different kinds of proteins. So the enzymes that I showed you before, those antioxidant enzymes, things like SOD and catalase and glutathione and hemoxygenase, and there's a whole bunch of them that protect you from further damage. That's a pretty good thing. So if the room is all full of secondhand smoke and we were breathing it in, we want to protect ourselves from that. And activating that pathway is going to do that. You're going to have a bigger shield, so to speak. There's another level down of what's going on, and that's these stress-related enzymes, heat shock proteins, autophagy proteins, housekeeping proteins that actually go around and clean up the damage that slips through. You can't prevent 100% of it. And if you started taking Protandim today, you have the accumulated damage, the accumulated buildup of damage for however many years before you started taking it. So there's kind of a 1-2 effect going on there. A shielding effect to prevent damage or slow damage or reduce damage, and a cleanup effect to get rid of the result of accumulated damage over months and years. So how does that happen? How do we get that effect to go? We get it by Protandim or any of these NRF2 activators. The way that the signal is sent into the cell, they bind to a cell surface receptor. These proteins called kinases cause a change in this complex right here. This is the secret of the whole thing. This NRF2 protein and this KEAP1 protein, that complex is very similar to having a thermostat inside your cell that's sensing stress. If the cell is under stress, you need to do something about it because that stress is detrimental to the function of the cell, but also detrimental to the longevity of that cell. That cell is going to become damaged if you don't address that stress. And if it becomes damaged, it doesn't work well. If it doesn't work well, it might do things that you don't want it to do. We can get into that later. But this is doing nothing right now except sensing the environment of the cell. Once it senses some sort of a stress, oxidative stress, inflammatory stress, glycation stress, whatever the stress may be, it leaps into action. So this kinase reaction allows you to activate that system without the stress. That's what Protandim is able to do. It flips that switch. It turns on that thermostat so that what happens is this NRF2 protein gets phosphorylated. You can see the difference here is that little P. That allows it to release from this KEAP1 protein, which is an anchoring protein. KEAP1 keeps the NRF2 here inactive. Once it's phosphorylated, it becomes active. It travels down here, binds to this part of the DNA, your genetic material in your nucleus. It's called the antioxidant response element, and then blam, that's the signal for the body to produce those enzymes. So it's a very coordinated, very exquisite kind of a system that we've found how to turn on. We can turn on that cell and let it produce more of those protective enzymes without having to induce the oxidative stress. Does that make sense to everybody? So that's great. But that's a cartoon. That's a theory. That's very abstract. We want to know what happens not only in a slide like this. Let me go back real quick. In a slide like this, we can show here are 20 studies plus a half a dozen patents that show that this works, that this happens in all those different tissue systems. That's great. I can show you a cartoon that shows you how it works sort of schematically, mechanistically. But what we really care about is what happens when somebody takes that little yellow tablet and eats it. Right? That's really what we care about. And this paper gets into that. We want to be able to measure, do humans have an increase in their production of these protective enzymes, and does that result in a lesser amount of damage in the body? And so we can measure levels of things like superoxide dismutase over a course of 120 days. The reason we measure at 120 days here, I'm going to show you 2 time points, 120 and 30. The reason we measure the enzymes at 120 is because we're measuring them in red blood cells, and those red blood cells turn over on the course of 30 to 60 days. So after 120 days, your whole population of red blood cells has turned over. So this population at 120 days has been supplemented, so to speak, for their entire lives. Okay? So at 120 days, that population of red blood cells we're able to measure a 34% increase in superoxide dismutase and a 54% increase in catalase. That's great. Statistically significant, clinically meaningful. Those are very large, very meaningful kinds of changes. But I'll guarantee you guys, none of these people woke up on day 120 and jumped out of bed and went, yeah, my catalase feels really good today, right? You can't feel that. And that's one of the challenges of studying oxidation, is that you can't necessarily feel it when you change it. It's what you feel is the accumulated damage in some tissue. That might be a cartilage, and now that accumulated damage in that cartilage is leading to stiffness. It could be in neurons in the brain, and that accumulated damage is now resulting in, where did I put my keys? That kind of stuff. It really depends on where in the body that damage is being manifested. So this is good. We're able to show a bigger shield, a more robust ability to protect yourself from whatever sources of imbalance are going to present themselves. We can also look at the actual damage to the cell. And the way we do that is to look at this. We stratify people by age, and we look at something called T-bars. This is a measure of oxidative damage to the cell membrane. And the advantage of it, the downside to it, is that you don't know where the damage is coming from. You don't know if the damage is coming from the cell membranes in the brain, or the cell membranes in the liver, or the cell membranes in the blood vessels. But what you do know is that on average, throughout the entire body, you're getting a perspective for the cell membrane damage throughout the whole body. And so what we're looking at here is, what do you notice before we've supplemented anybody? What do you see here? 20-year-olds are down here, 40-year-olds are here a little bit higher, 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds. There's a very dramatic, very noticeable age-related increase. Why would an older person have a higher level of these T-bars, a higher level of cellular damage in their body than a 20-year-old? Because they're old. Because they're old. Which means what? More oxidative stress. They've been around longer. They've been subjected to more sources of stress, more sources of damage over time. They've had more opportunity to damage their cells, right? And we can see that biochemically. There's another reason that it might be that as we age, we lose the ability to activate those internal protective mechanisms. Our thermostat might become less sensitive, less efficient. We're not able to activate it as readily when we're exposed to those stressors, and so we become more damaged. Because that NRF2 complex can get oxidized and damaged just like every other complex in the cell, right? So oxidative stress affects that as well, which that in and of itself is a reason to try to improve the efficiency of it. So before people were supplemented, they were asked, did they supplement with vitamin E and vitamin C? So this study was done in 2005. So right around that time, antioxidant supplementation, E, C, beta-carotene, selenium, those sorts of things, were still very, very prevalent, front page news kind of thing. So lots of people were taking them. And if you draw an average line through those people, you can see that not only are they not protected, they don't have a lower level of damage, they actually have a statistically higher level of oxidative damage, cellular damage in their bodies. Not a good thing. But when we supplement with Protandim for 30 days, this is what they look like. And when we remove all the before numbers, what you see is that you can't even tell an 80-year-old or a 60-year-old or a 40-year-old from a 20-year-old. That age-related increase in oxidative damage is completely removed. That's a pretty good place. And this is where the idea of Protandim being a quote-unquote anti-aging kind of a supplement, from a cellular perspective, it certainly is. That those cells now in that 80-year-old person are biochemically equivalent in certain ways to a 20 or 30-year-old. That's pretty good. So this is the conclusion drawn right from that paper. Remarkably, this age-dependent increase in T-bars was almost completely abolished by Protandim treatment with an overall average reduction of the oxidative stress marker by 40%. So almost completely abolished. I want to just make one note that I don't for most audiences, but with the preponderance of highly active people in here, I want to point this out. You see that we're not bringing this number down to 0. That is important. That is important. I'm going to give you I probably shouldn't say this because I know this is being taped. This is new data that hasn't been released yet, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway. We just have some data that if you completely crush oxidative signaling in the body and you over supplement with people. Remember I mentioned that you can get problems, health problems, prostate cancer, skin cancer, that kind of stuff. You can counteract the training adaptation after exercise, and probably the reason that happens is because we're interfering with the system that I just described. We're interfering with the body's own internal mechanisms. When we apply this sort of an effect, when we activate NRF2 and we use the body's own systems, training adaptations happen normally. So we've compared that Protandim supplementation to vitamin C supplementation. And vitamin C supplementation, we see an interference of the training response. And the training response we looked at there was mitochondria biogenesis, the ability of the cell to make more mitochondria, these energy factories, in response to endurance training. When you take high doses of vitamin C, that stops. You don't get better endurance as a result of your training. That sucks. It really does, that you're really working hard and you're not getting the benefits of it. With Protandim, it happens normally. You get the normal production of increased biogenesis, increased production of these mitochondria, right? That right there is huge, huge, because it shows, I mean, so I'll go back to my TCM colleagues and I'll say, hey, guess what? This doesn't interfere with the normal process and you still get the benefits. And they'll go, well, duh. And we're going to be using these things for 3,000 years. You know, so it's sort of a running joke that I come back with my data and they go, yeah, we already knew that. You know, we knew it in a different way. And now we know in a different way because we can use biochemistry. So all of that, can I take 5 more minutes? Okay. So all of that is a lead into very quick how we do product development at LifeVantage, right? That whole idea of maintaining biochemical balance to help people perform better in certain ways, help them perform better, look better, feel better. Nobody is going to come to us and say, you know, hey, do you have a Nerf2 activator that I could buy, that I could sign up for? That's not a thing, right? People aren't going to ask for that. People aren't even going to ask for you to balance their oxidative stress. That's too abstract for people. But what we can do is we can take that science and we can take that idea from traditional medicine and apply Western techniques to sort of validate it, I guess, in objective ways. And then we can use that thinking to build products like this, feel your best, look your best, perform your best, that people actually will ask for. So it's great that I just stood up here for 45 minutes and talked to you guys about Nerf2 and oxidative stress and free radicals and SOD. And, you know, hopefully there's one person in here who's as big a nerd as me who enjoys that kind of stuff. But I get it that the average person doesn't. Greg, I know you're that nerd. What people want is they want this kind of stuff. They want to feel better, they want to look better, they want to perform better. And on that platform of having solved the oxidative stress problem and have solved that rebalancing the cell problem, we're able to build those products much more efficiently. And I'm going to skip over a couple of these because I want to show you what I think is a really important one, a product category that we just launched about, when did we launch Axio? A month ago? 2 months ago?
October.
First week of October. So, and it's been absolutely off the charts since we launched it because it's kind of an energy drink, but it's I don't like calling that because it's more than that. It's in this category. It's in this feel your best category. The reason this is one of my favorite categories to talk about is because this is where so many people have their biggest problems. The number one reason that people will go to their primary healthcare practitioner is to say, you know what, I don't feel right. Something's off. And what's off is their biochemistry. What's off is the fact that they're out of balance. And so that poor physician or nurse practitioner or whoever that primary healthcare practitioner is, I have a lot of friends who are in that space, and I feel for them because somebody comes to them and says, I feel terrible, help me. And they don't have something that fixes what that person has. They don't have something that fixes that biochemical imbalance, that restores their vigor. And what they get, what that patient actually gets is something like this. If your problem is mood, you might get one of these, right? And that's fine. They're going to change the way you feel, but maybe not rebalance you in the way that you need if you're out of balance because of this stressful world around us. If your issue is restlessness, you can't relax enough to go to sleep, you might get one of these sleep drugs. If your issue is mental focus, you might get one of these sort of focus medications. If your issue is just plain old general tiredness, you might self-medicate with one of those. And everybody laughs when I put that last flight up there. That all together is about $100 billion. So I mentioned before, in 5 or 6 years' time, the energy drink category is estimated to be about $20 billion. But this is a much bigger way of thinking about that fatigue problem, that not feeling your best problem that millions and millions and millions of people have. And a lot of these people who are taking these things, I'm not an anti-pharmaceutical person at all. There's lots of people who need these kinds of things. But if your issue is just a little rebalancing that you need, you probably don't need one of these sledgehammers. You probably just need maybe something natural that just tweaks you a little bit, like what we're able to do here at a cellular level. So this is the product that we launched to try to solve that problem. It's called Axio. There's 2 versions of it. You can see the blends here. And you can see we took a very similar approach to how we develop Protandim and how we develop TrueScience. We took this matrix approach. If we know that there are all of these different switches, if mood might be the issue that you're fatigued, or if focus is the issue you're fatigued, or stress is the issue of your fatigue, why not flip all of those switches simultaneously in a natural way to get somebody to feel better? And that's exactly what we've done with these sorts of things, with catechins, with proanthocyanidins, with theanine, etc. So I'll share just 2 pieces of data and then I'll wrap it up. When we studied Axio, we did a 400-person usage study just before we launched it. And right now we have some brain scan, cognitive battery kinds of studies. So in 6 months or so, I'll be able to stand up here and show you, here's your brain on Axio, and be able to show you magnetic resonance imaging, show what areas are lighting up and stuff like that. So it'll be nice to show sort of mechanistically how we're getting this kind of stuff, which is subjective ways of what people are reporting. So this is the huckleberry green grape flavor. This is the red raspberry flavor. And what we wanted to find out is how fast did people feel this effect and how long did it last? And so people were feeling this effect, this initial energy boost, were feeling it within 30 minutes, the majority of people. It was lasting for most people, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, even some people out to 4 more hours, the majority of people. So that told us 2 things. People feel it quickly, and it lasts a long time. That's pretty good. But we also want to make sure we didn't go overboard. You can go overboard with energy and actually push people into tension and irritability and anxiety and those sorts of things. So we also asked people, in addition to sort of the energy boost effect, were you getting jitters? And clearly people weren't feeling like this was overboard, that we were pushing them over the edge in terms of the amount of energy. We found that people had a very strong, noticeable benefit in terms of mental focus, no matter what flavor that they took. This one I really liked. This accomplished more as you take it. So these data are based on 7 days of usage. So using the product once a day, every day, for 7 days. So think about the first 2 slides that I showed right here. There's an effect over minutes. There's an effect over hours. And there's a different set of effects over days. This accomplish more is that motivation idea. That's the vacuum cleaner story, right? Where somebody felt like they were motivated to do something. That's something you don't get from any energy drinks, right? Energy drinks in quotations. So I wish we could call this a performance drink, a vigor drink, a rebalancing drink. Those aren't marketing, shot all of those down. And so this is our healthy energy drink, a guilt-free way of improving how you feel. And people will come back and they'll say, how is an energy drink helping me sleep better at night? And the reason is we're resetting that circadian rhythm. We're rebalancing your body so that you're energetic in the day and relaxed at night, exactly the way we're supposed to be if we're in balance, right? So some of the comments that people had. So I want to skip to, these are some of the other studies that we have ongoing right now. So very much LifeVantage is a science-based company. I want to get back to this, and I'll close with this. You saw the same sort of motif when I was talking about biochemistry and behavior. When I was talking about, here we were talking about oxidation, and in the center there was this concept of vigor. That's always a great thing, right? For me to go, last month I was at the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and I gave a talk about vigor and talked about biochemistry, and I actually used some of the same slides, showed different data. Later on, so next week I'll be at the anti-aging conference. I'll talk about vigor. I'll talk about oxidative balance and all that kind of stuff. And it's awesome for me to go and talk to scientific colleagues about that and be able to say, look, here's the chemicals, here's the psychology, this is a good thing for your patients, and they all go, yes, very interesting data, Dr. Talbott, and here's your plaque, and that's it. It doesn't go any further than that. What I love about doing public community talks like this is that if there's one person in here who gets excited about this as I am, you're going to go out and talk to somebody else about it, and talk to somebody else about it, talk to somebody else about it. This concept right here, which we measure as vigor, I think is a bigger idea. It's about getting someone to become a better version of themselves. If you're an athlete, that means your physical performance or mental performance. It means achieving something. But it also can mean it could be being a better mom. It could be being better at your job. It could be building a business on the side. It could be so many things that are are very aspirational for people. So if we're building products like this, feel your best, look your best, perform your best, based on this idea of balance, and we can get people to hear, that's awesome. Because, I mean, if I can come out here and I can help you feel better, that's a win, right? You feel better, that's great. I feel better because I helped you feel better. But if we can think of it this way, you're going to feel so good and motivated. You're going to help her feel better. And then she's going to feel the same way and better and better. You end up paying it forward. And we see this kind of thing in these clinical trials where we're taking spit and urine and blood from people, right? This is not a fun thing to do. But they feel so good about it, they talk to people. And that's in a clinical setting. That's not even in a community setting or in a sort of a share setting. So this is a big idea. It sounds kind of grandiose when you say it out loud, but this is the kind of thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. I like to do the data, I like to do the studies, I like to go to the conferences, but when I can share this and it can spread from just a scientific conference to potentially millions of people, that's a huge win. And I'm really happy that you guys came to listen to me talk about it tonight. Thanks a lot.